Kevin Larsen, and I have been here before on a couple different occasions, once to preach and once to share with you about the archaeology work that I do in Israel, and have been several times just to visit, and it is a blessing to be with you. You know, it is almost the holiday season. And soon, we're a month away from Thanksgiving. We're 2 months from being the day after Christmas, all right? And it's just going to fly by. And the holiday season is a time for road trips. So this morning, I want us to take a road trip, all right? And on our road trip, I want us to retrace a road trip that is recorded for us in Luke chapter 7. There are several road trips that are recorded in the Gospels where people had an encounter with Jesus. And these encounters are not just any normal time of meeting with him. You know, these weren't the kind of things where they would go home and they say, hey, I ran into so-and-so today. These encounters are an all of a sudden, they realize who Jesus is. And somehow all their hopes and their fears and their possibilities of life, death, heaven, all are bound up in their response to him. So today's encounter is a story about a mother's heart. So if you have a Bible, I would encourage you to open with me to the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. And we're going to begin at verse 11 in the text. I'm going to read through it with you, and then we're going to talk through it. Soon afterward, Jesus traveled to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." And then he went up and he touched the briar. Now, some translations say the word coffin, that they were carrying him on. And standing still, he said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." And the dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." And this news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. All right. So Jesus and his disciples, there's a crowd of people there. They just started following Jesus around because of all the things that Jesus was doing and all the things that Jesus was teaching. They traveled to this village called Nain. Now, Nain is a little tiny village. It's about 9 miles south of Nazareth, about 25 miles southwest of Capernaum. Now, Capernaum is where Jesus was just prior to this event. And when Jesus was walking along the road toward the town of Nain, the people of Nain, they're coming out. And they're carrying a dead person who happened to be the only son of his mother. They were coming out to bury him. She was a widow, and he had just died, and so they're headed out to bury him. We don't know a lot about the details about the situation here on the road. How did the widow's husband die? How old was the son? What was his name? What was his mother's name? Did she have any daughters by chance? We don't know. What we do know is that the son had most certainly died within the past 24 hours. Without the lack of embalming abilities and given the climate, we know that people were buried within 24 hours. And so this mother, just in the past day or two, her son has died. and she is shocked, and she's probably numb in a lot of different ways. And the raw, deepest moments of pain, they're just starting to set in for her. And we're told here by Luke that Jesus saw her. Jesus saw this mother. And this is so important because over 40 times in the Gospels, in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, over 40 times we are specifically told that Jesus saw someone. And one of the things about this story is that it teaches us so much about the compassion of Jesus. And compassion always begins with seeing. So often we come up short with compassion because we don't really see people. We don't really see people, or we are too focused on ourselves. You know, we have our own plans. We have our own agenda. We have our own assumptions that we draw based on any situation. And here on the road to Nain, Jesus, he had an agenda. He was headed that way for a reason. But he let it go because there was somebody that was hurting. And he saw her, like really saw her. He understood what was going on. And sometimes I think we need to ask ourselves, do we see what Jesus sees? Do we notice people? Do we notice hurting people? And do we have the kind of posture that really seeks to understand people? Or are we so just wrapped up with ourselves that we just miss what is really, really happening? Some of you may have heard of Stephen Covey. He was an author. Probably the most famous work of his is the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he tells about a time when he was on a subway. It was a Sunday morning. He was riding the subway, and everybody on there in that subway car, they were going about their normal Sunday morning. They were reading their newspapers, they were drinking their coffee, that sort of thing. Except when this one guy got on. He got on with a couple of kids, and he happened to sit down right next to Stephen Covey. But his kids, they didn't sit down. They were kind of bouncing off the walls. They were being crazy, running up and down the aisle, being loud, yelling at each other. And the father, he didn't do anything about it. He just sat there. And Covey writes that he was thinking to himself, man, you got to get a grip on your kids. You know, there's some pretty lousy parenting happening right now. And finally, because it just kept going on and on and on, Covey says that he decided to say something to the guy. And he says, sir, your kids are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you could, rein them in a little bit. And the man looked up at Covey, almost like he was coming out of a trance, and he said, you're right, I should. And then he says, we just came from the hospital, and their mom died about an hour ago. He said, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. And Covey writes, suddenly, I saw things differently. And because I saw things differently, I felt differently. And everything changed in an instant. Do you really see people? Try to see people. Jesus saw this woman, a widow, who had just lost her son. And in verse 13, it goes on to say this, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. Some translations say it this way: his heart overflowed with compassion. My favorite translation says it this way: his heart broke. Now, I don't like to share when I'm preaching Greek words, and I tell my students, don't share Greek when you're preaching because you're just showing your underwear when you do that, all right? But I'm going to break my rule, all right, because this is my favorite Greek word here, all right? And I just have to share it with you, all right? It is often translated compassion. It is the word splagna, all right? I love the sound of it, splagna, okay? It almost sounds like you put your finger down your throat and you splagna it all over the place, all right? But that's actually kind of what the word means, really. The word splagna literally refers to your intestines. It refers to your guts. It means to have your guts twisted and ripped out. It's that feeling you get in your stomach when you really look and you see something that's wrong or tragic and it shouldn't be that way. And it turns your stomach. It hurts you deep in your guts. That's splagna. And I want to tell you, Christians are to be like Jesus. And if you wear the name Christian, you're to be like Jesus. It's part of our mantra. It's part of our marching orders. And there may be no character trait that is more Christ-like than being compassionate and being like Jesus. Feeling deep in your guts, deep in your splagna. That's what Jesus felt when he saw this woman who just lost her only son. And what's really interesting is that this was a real common scene back then. When people died, this is what happened. The body is carried out for burial. And it's normal for us to see a hearse driving down the road with cars behind it. And so this was a very ordinary moment. But Jesus was an extraordinary, or has an extraordinary reaction to it. He didn't just feel sorry for her. He felt this woman's pain. His guts were ripped out. You know, do you feel what Jesus felt when other people hurt? Do you hurt with them? And it's one of the things that I love about being part of a church. We share our hearts. We carry each other's burdens, according to Galatians chapter 6. And when you're really part of a church, the hurts you go through, other people go through them with you. They feel them. And it's reciprocal. When someone you care about and they're united in Christ with you, when they hurt, you feel that. And when you hurt, they feel it. You know, there are people who come to church on Sundays, and that's great, but that's where it ends. If that's you, if the extent of your connectedness with other Christians is just 1 or 2 hours on Sunday, you're missing out on one of the better parts of belonging to a church. There's more. Come further up. Come further in. Do you have people who you are united with in Christ, who hurt when you hurt, and you hurt when they hurt, who carry each other's burdens? You know, part of how this story on the road to Nain pushes us is that we just don't feel what Jesus felt, but we do what Jesus did. Sometimes we have an emotional reaction to somebody's pain, and we don't do anything about it. But with true Christ-like compassion, there's always an and. With compassion, there is always an and. Compassion is a noun, but as Christians, we need to make it a verb. When the word compassion is used in the Gospels to describe the way that Jesus felt, it is always followed by an action. In fact, most of the time, when the word compassion is with the word compassion, it is immediately followed by and, not a period. For example, in Matthew chapter 20, Jesus had compassion on 2 blind men, and he healed them. In Mark 1, Jesus had compassion on a leper, and he made him well. In Mark chapter 6, we read that Jesus had compassion on the people, and he began to feed them. In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus had compassion on the people, and he prayed for them. There's always an and. And the dangerous myth that we could fall into is thinking that, oh, I'm compassionate because I feel compassion for you. And then we just kind of stop. But Jesus felt something, and he does something about it. He cares. He doesn't stop. And what does he do? Verse 14 tells us that he walked up and he touched the briar. He touched the coffin. Now, they didn't have coffins like we do with sides and a lid, all right? It was a pallet, and the person was laid out on the pallet, and people carried the pallet. This flat piece of wood. And I would suggest to you that maybe Jesus didn't just walk up and touch the wood underneath the body. I think what we're supposed to understand is that Jesus touched the body. And by doing this, Jesus was really doing something quite amazing here. Here he was. He was crossing some boundaries that people back then never crossed. Never. The religious leaders had created and established the system of extra laws that they had added on to the Bible, and they said people had to follow these rules because for these religious leaders, it was all about keeping the outward appearance. It was all about cleanliness rather than being most concerned about being right on the inside. And one of the laws said you can't touch a dead body. Dead bodies were considered unclean. And if you touch, then you become unclean. And I think a big reason a lot of people today kind of turn away from the church is because of this. Just like back then, so many religious people today can be all about keeping up appearances, all about the external cleanliness, all about the rules, that sort of thing. And if that's why some of you maybe have struggled with church, I get it. And God gets it too. And it's important to know that God doesn't want the church to be that way either. In fact, in this story, we see that Jesus walks up, his heart goes out to the woman, and ignoring all these religious policies, he touches her son, her dead son. He's like, you guys don't understand. You've created this boundary of sorts that would keep me from showing compassion the way that I want to show compassion. And so I'm going to cross your boundaries. And Jesus does. And I think it's important to note that nobody comes and says to Jesus, hey, you should do something for this woman. You know, nobody came up to Jesus and asked him to do this miracle. She didn't even ask for it. There's no hint, there is no trace of expectation with her. There's no trace of faith in her either. There was nothing in the dead man to merit this. Nobody said anything about the young man. Oh, Jesus, maybe you could do something. There's no merit here. There's no petition here. You understand, this resurrection miracle came totally from Jesus' great compassion and love. It is all grace. And Jesus touched the briar or the dead body, and the crowd most certainly gasped because of how shocking that was. And then something more incredible happens. The boy gasps. Jesus' touching brings this boy back to life. And he resurrects this son, and indirectly, it does something just as dramatic for the mother. If you were a widow back then, your only real hope was your son. If you had no husband, if you had no son, it might lead you to have to do some questionable things, some horrible things to provide income. And if you had daughters, who knows what would have become of those daughters? But Jesus touches her son. He comes back to life, and Jesus walks this boy over to his mother, and he hands him to her. And in doing so, Jesus not only gives her son back to her, but he also gives hope to her. Because just a few moments ago, she didn't have any hope. She was hopeless. This is an incredible encounter. This is an incredible episode here. So please hear me. If you are hurting, if you are broken, if you are struggling in some way right now, I want you to know that Jesus sees you. He is able and he wants to bring some measure of healing to you. He's able to heal you fully one day. But even right now, he is able to bring healing to whatever situation you find yourself in. And as followers of Jesus, as Christians, as the church, we need to see what Jesus sees. We need to feel what Jesus feels. We need to hurt with hurting people. And we need to do what Jesus did. We need to find ways to touch and to bring healing and to bring hope to hurting people. It's a great story, isn't it? This resurrection story. It's one of the best. In fact, resurrection stories are the best. Did you know there are several resurrection stories in the Bible? You know, there's this one. We all know about Lazarus coming back from the dead. And Jesus made that grand declaration when he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And there's the resurrection of Jairus' daughter. And in all these stories of Jesus raising these people back to life, it's really a display of Jesus' compassion. And that compassion causes his heart to act in a moment. But here's the deal. All these people, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, the son of the sweet old widow of Nain, all these people would die again. And what we all need is the resurrection of Jesus. And of course, that's the resurrection of all resurrections, isn't it? Yes. The resurrection of Jesus. I hope that you celebrate the resurrection more than just one Sunday a year. This story about the raising of the widow's son foreshadows when God the Father would step in and raise Jesus from the grave, easing our struggle and our pain because of sin and death. And he would bring victory in the face of that ultimate foe. I don't know if we can think about the resurrection of Jesus enough, because it's just simply the best. Jesus' resurrection changes everything. Just like Jesus resurrected this son for the widow of Nain and resurrected this mother's hopes there, so Jesus' resurrection, his victory over death, restores our ultimate hope, our disappointing, our difficult world. We have the hope of the resurrection. And I don't think we can think about that enough. We're going to sing a song. It's an opportunity for you to make a decision. It's an opportunity for you to make a decision that, I've never accepted Jesus' resurrection. I've never accepted what he's promised to give. You need to claim that today. You need to do it today. Express your faith in Christ and meet him in the grave of a watery baptism to be resurrected to new life. Maybe the challenge for you today is, I haven't been stopping and looking at people the way that Jesus looks at them. Maybe the commitment and the decision you need to make is, I'm going to try my best to begin to see different and put aside my agenda to see and to do something. We all have a decision to make. If it's one that you want to make public and share with us, we invite you to come. Let's stand and let's sing.